Hi everybody, welcome to Unit 2. This video is going to go over the assignments in this unit and then an overview of some of the information that you'll come across in the unit. So by the end of Unit 2, you will read chapters 3 and 4 from our book. You will view the videos and the lesson plan that are listed in Canvas for Unit 2. Now, while you're doing those things, you might want to take some notes so that you're ready for the discussion circle, because your discussion circle will be meeting before the end of Unit 2 at some point, and it will be talking about the first 4 chapters in the book, the videos and lesson plan from Units 1 and 2. So that's a lot of stuff, and some of it you might have looked at a couple of weeks ago. That's why I encourage people to take a few notes, so when you come to that discussion, you can be a fully contributing member of your discussion circle. So let's talk a little bit about the discussion circle. You'll meet sometime before the end of the unit, because the last day of Unit 2 is when your reflection is due. So your discussion circle entails really 2 people from your group, your circle, stepping up to be leaders for this time. Everybody else will get a turn during one of the other discussion circles. So one person is the organizer, and that person will send out an email, try to get everybody to decide on a time. That person will set up the discussion circle in whatever tool you're going to use, whether that's Zoom or Google Hangouts or some other, it could be Skype. And that person will send out a reminder the day of the discussion circle so people don't forget. And then you'll also need a discussion circle leader. That person will bring to the discussion the questions or prompts that I have listed in Unit 2. That person will be responsible for keeping the discussion going. Now the time for the discussion is 60 minutes, and that might seem like a long time, but once you get talking, I think it will go pretty fast. I took a graduate class recently in the library school, and our professor had our discussion time be 90 minutes. So I thought, oh, that seemed like kind of long. So I cut back to 60 minutes. But it really does go fast, and it's fun to get to know each other. So your circle group will talk together. Then after you finish that, you'll want to go and do your reflection in Canvas. It's listed as a quiz, but it's not really a quiz because the questions are all open-ended and they have you reflect on the discussion. You should know, though, when you get to the end of the reflection, that it will give you a score for your quiz. And please know I'm going to go in and read your reflections, and I'll really be the one who finalizes the score. So also in Unit 2, you'll do quiz number 2. And that will cover the information from chapters 3 and 4 and the videos and the lesson plan. Now we're talking about differentiation, and so I liked this quote: differentiated instruction allows all students to access the same classroom curriculum, so the same content, by providing different entry points, learning tasks, and outcomes that are tailored to students' needs. And I especially like that phrase, entry points. So different ways for students to access the curriculum or the content or whatever the ideas are that you're teaching, where the students are all expected to learn the same thing, but your task as the teacher is to adjust the ways students learn that content based on what they need. And that is a challenge, and hopefully this class is going to help get you ready for that challenge. But before we can begin to differentiate what we're teaching, we have to understand what it is our students need. And we learn that by assessing them, by observing them, by listening, by watching, by figuring out what makes them tick as learners. To say that each child in your class is different seems a bit simplistic, but it's true. Well, now we're not talking about just basic differences, like whether a child likes to lay down on the carpet to read or sit in a chair to read. We're really talking about profound factors that can influence a child's ability to learn, to feel safe, to form relationships with trusted adults and classmates, and all of those things work together to impact a child's learning. "'Cause I Ain't Got a Pencil" by Joshua T. Dickerson. I woke myself up because we ain't got an alarm clock. Dug in the dirty clothes basket 'cause ain't nobody washed my uniform. Brushed my hair and teeth in the dark 'cause the lights ain't on. even got my baby sister ready because my mama wasn't home. Got us both to school on time to eat us a good breakfast. Then when I got to class, the teacher fussed because I ain't got a pencil. I think this poem is a good reminder of how much our students rely on what happens at home and how that influences what happens at school. I told you earlier that I spent the past year at an elementary school in Topeka, Ross Elementary. These are some of the students that I worked with. And Ross has a third of the students are African American, a third are Caucasian, and a third are Hispanic. So it has a nice mixture of different racial and ethnic backgrounds. 100% of the students are receive free lunch. So it's a high poverty school. There are 625 students in the school. And so it's a school with a lot of needs. Probably the biggest lesson that I learned while I was at Ross is that teaching is all about relationships. Once you form those relationships and you show students that you value each one of them as a person, no matter what they look like, what they smell like, how they talk, what they can or can't academically do, once you let them know that you value each one of them, then they will come to trust you. And to me, effective learning can only begin when students come to trust you. And you will, by them trusting you, you'll better be able to figure out their learning needs. And until you can do that, it's really a guessing game. So it's forming those relationships that can make the biggest impact on students' learning. And it's you as a teacher being able to accept those differences that kids bring to school. You might be familiar with Philip Pullman. He's the author of the book, the children's novel, The Golden Compass. People are too complicated to have simple labels. Now, in chapter 3 in our book, you're going to read that the author does put kids into categories. And the author also makes sure to say that these categories or labels should not hinder kids, but sometimes they give us a good place to begin. So we don't want to overly rely on labels, but they can help us figure out where to start with learners, and sometimes that is necessary in order to get us down the road to finding out what individual students need. So you may work with advanced learners or struggling learners, and it's possible that a child could be advanced in some things and struggling in other things, or advanced on some days and not so advanced on other days, or struggling because something happened at home on that day before school or after school, or after school the day before, and that can impact a child's learning on any given day. So students don't always stay nicely in the categories that we place them in. Also, we know that a label like English language learner can mean a broad range of things. An English language learner could be a student who has just recently moved to the United States from another country and doesn't speak any English. Non-English speaking, or NES is the acronym that we use. But an English language learner can also be a student who has been in the United States, maybe even born in the United States, but whose family doesn't speak English. And so the child started learning English when he or she came to school. And so by the time that child reaches your classroom, unless you're the kindergarten teacher, that child has already learned some English and may be able to communicate in a conversation, or maybe can read in English, or maybe can write a little bit in English, but still has that same label as a child who knows no English. So we want to be careful because there is a broad spectrum. And then of course we don't want to leave out the learners in the middle who often get overlooked because we're trying to meet the needs of the students on different ends of the continuum. When we talk about diversity, we're really looking at a wide spectrum and how that diverse background can impact a child's learning on any given day. So race, culture, religion, economics, physical disabilities. Those are what I would say are fairly common terms that are used to describe diversity. But I added a few extra ones, and one is gender, because sometimes there are factors in gender that may impact a child's learning. For example, research does show us that overall, boys learn to read more slowly and struggle more than girls. Now, that's not to say that all boys are not very good readers, but it is to say that children who struggle with reading tend to be boys. And so maybe there are factors, gender factors, that could influence a child's learning at any given time. Sexual orientation can cause stress. It can bring on bullying, and that can cause stress. And that factor, the stress factor, can impact a child's ability to learn. Students who have learning differences, maybe students who are receiving special education services, or students who have a learning disability, or students who just have that one thing that they just can't get past. For me, it was science, and I struggled with science. I wouldn't say I had a learning disability, but I had a learning difference because some of my friends were really good at science and I wasn't. And so that can impact my abilities to learn. And then I added mental health issues because trauma, stress, depression, feeling suicidal, all of which we deal with in the elementary school, those can have a big impact on a child's feeling about being able to learn, and can be important for us to understand as we're wanting to meet those needs of those students. So what is a teacher to do? Well, you want to focus on growth mindset. And growth mindset really is the guidance, the positiveness, the support that a teacher gives to a child that helps a child understand that it's okay if you haven't learned this yet, but you're going to. It's that belief that each child can learn, even if they haven't learned it yet. And that word yet is a big factor when it comes to helping children believe in themselves and what they're able to do. So a teacher really becomes an organizer of learning opportunities rather than a person who gives content, stands up in the front and tells kids what it is they should know. Really, now you're creating opportunities for children to get beyond that yet, to really learn to their full potential. So you all did a word cloud in Unit 1. So here's my word cloud from chapters 3 and 4. And I would say that one of my favorite phrases is looking at children through the eyes of love. And I talked about previously forming relationships. And I want to give an example. When I was teaching in the library, I had a student who came to the library with his class. I was teaching a whole class lesson, and this student was sitting over to the side on one of the tables, and I was walking around helping students. And this student was wearing dirty clothes. He had old shoes. They had holes in them. His hair hadn't been washed. His face was dirty, and he did smell. And it was all I could do to go up to him and stand by him and give him the support that he needed to be successful in what we were doing, to look at him with eyes of love. And you have to be able to do that with each and every one of the students in your class, no matter what challenges they bring to you and to the classroom. I put the phrase mentally lazy. Some people might wonder that if you haven't read chapter 3 yet. And it really focuses on advanced learners and how if we don't keep challenging them, their brain is a muscle and it loses its strength and they can become mentally lazy, and we may not be able to recognize their true potential if we don't really meet their learning needs like we should. So it's really asking the question, what works best compared to what else and for whom? So here's what teachers can do. You can assess to figure out what your students know. That is so powerful because you don't know what it is they need until you find out through assessments. You can design lessons that keep kids engaged. And that's tricky because they have video games and computers and television and media, and you really are competing with those things. So you have to step up and make sure your lessons are just wowing kids. be clear on what it is you want students to know. Because if they can't figure it out and they're struggling, then that makes things even worse. And keeping students actively thinking. So we can use technology to help us do that. We can use interactive, engaging activities. We can have students working on teams and collaborating. All of those things can help make learning active for students. And that's what it takes to really differentiate in your classroom.